Close your eyes and imagine this. It's 40,000 years ago. A frozen wind cuts across the plains of Ice Age Europe. The air is sharp, almost painful to breathe, and snow crunches underfoot as heavy clouds blot out the pale sun. In a small shelter tucked against a cliff, a family huddles together around a fire. The flames flicker on stone walls, throwing strange shadows, the kind that make the cave itself seem alive. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a heavy brow and deep-set eyes, carefully chips a piece of flint. He's shaping a tool. Sparks fly with each strike. Nearby, a woman threads sinew through the hide of an animal, making clothing strong enough to withstand the brutal cold. A child sits close, watching, imitating, learning. In this moment, survival depends not on brute strength, but on planning, teaching, memory, and intelligence. This is not the picture most of us grew up with. For decades, the word Neanderthal has been used as an insult. We've been told they were clumsy, stupid, half-human brutes. Cartoons, schoolbooks, even scientific illustrations painted them as hairy, hunched, and slow-witted cavemen who deserved extinction. We, Homo sapiens, were the clever ones, the artists, the thinkers, the inventors. Neanderthals, they were the losers of evolution, the rough draft of humanity, doomed to fail. But what if that story is wrong? What if Neanderthals weren't dim-witted cavemen at all, but intelligent, resourceful, and even creative in ways that mirror our own minds? What if they were not the failed branch of humanity, but another version of us, one that thrived in a deadly world for hundreds of thousands of years? Tonight, as you listen, we're going to challenge one of the biggest misconceptions in history. We'll explore the evidence, from tools to art, from DNA to survival strategies, that shows Neanderthals may have been far smarter than we ever believed. And as the fire crackles and the Ice Age winds howl outside their caves, we'll ask a simple but unsettling question. If Neanderthals were so smart, why are we the ones still here and not them? To appreciate just how wrong the stereotype is, we need to remember how deeply it has shaped our imagination. For over a century, Neanderthals were dismissed as evolutionary dead ends. In 1912, when one of the first full skeletons was discovered, it was drawn with bent knees, hunched posture, and a sloping, ape-like stance. The message was clear. These were primitive, inferior beings. But slowly, evidence began to whisper a different story. Stone tools more advanced than expected, jewelry crafted from shells, pigments for painting, and later, DNA evidence that proved they weren't just others, they were family. We carry their blood inside us even now. The insult Neanderthal might still mean stupid brute in everyday speech, but in the last 20 years, discoveries have forced scientists, and all of us, to rethink. Instead of cavemen, we see problem solvers. Instead of grunts, we hear language. Instead of shadows on cave walls, we find evidence of imagination. This introduction is about reframing that picture. Imagine again that Neanderthal family in the cave. The father chips flint not randomly, but with memory of countless attempts before. He knows the right angle, the right pressure. He hands the sharp-edged stone to his son. The boy tries, clumsy, awkward, but learns. The mother, threading bone needles, mutters words. Perhaps not identical to ours, but recognizable as language, a way of passing knowledge. They are not dumb beasts. They are teachers, engineers, artists, survivors. And the proof of their intelligence isn't just in imagination. It's in the bones, the tools, the DNA, the things they left behind. This series of stories is not about pitying Neanderthals as failed humans. It's about realizing how much of them lives on in us, and how much we owe them. Neanderthals were not weaker. They were not less intelligent. In fact, in some ways, they may have been better suited for survival than we were. They endured Ice Age winters, hunted massive prey, and cared for each other in ways that still astonish researchers. The shocking truth is this: we didn't beat them because we were smarter. The reasons for their disappearance are far more complex and far more haunting. So, as you settle into bed or wherever you are listening, prepare for a journey through a world colder, harsher, and more dangerous than anything we know today. We'll look at the tools they shaped with precision, the art they carved into caves, the language coded in their genes, the cooperation that kept their families alive. By the end, you may see them not as them at all, but as another version of us. Because the truth is, Neanderthals were smarter than we ever believed. And the more we uncover, the more we realize how close we came to being Neanderthals ourselves. The air bites with a cold so sharp it feels alive, cutting through fur, skin, and bone, as if the world itself wants to erase every trace of warmth. You open your eyes to darkness, not the soft darkness of a bedroom, but the deep, consuming black of a cave at dawn. The stone beneath you is hard and uneven, carrying the chill of a night that stretched too long. The only comfort is the faint glow of dying embers at the center of the shelter, small sparks clinging desperately to life. Around you, others begin to stir. A cough from an elder, a child's faint whimper, the rustle of dried hides as they shift. Your tribe does not wake to the gentle hum of an alarm clock or the smell of coffee. You wake to survival. Outside, the world is hostile. Europe during the Ice Age was not a landscape of green forests and fertile fields, but a frozen expanse ruled by predators and scarcity. Endless plains stretched under blankets of snow, broken by cliffs and glaciers. Winds carried ice like daggers. Herds of mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses wandered the tundra, their massive bodies built for the bitter cold. But so too were the predators. Cave lions, hyenas the size of modern tigers, and bears whose claws could slice through bone as easily as bark. Every step beyond the cave mouth was a negotiation with danger. In our world, comfort is a given. We wrap ourselves in blankets spun from machines, tap buttons for heat, and open refrigerators brimming with food flown across continents. But for Neanderthals, every comfort was earned with risk. A warm hide coat meant a dangerous hunt against a beast far larger than a man. A full belly meant hours of tracking prey through snow, blood on the hands, and firelit butchery long into the night. Even water was no guarantee. Streams could freeze, ice could crack, and snow had to be melted, painstakingly, to quench thirst. Imagine waking each morning with no certainty of tomorrow. The fire must be rekindled before frost steals its last breath. Weapons must be sharpened from stone before teeth and claws appear at the cave mouth. Children must be fed not with prepackaged meals but with marrow sucked from bones, roots dug from the earth, and the precious fat scraped from hides. The smallest mistakes, leaving fire unattended, wandering too far, choosing the wrong path across ice, could mean death not just for one person, but for the tribe. Yet somehow they endured, not just for a year or a century, but for hundreds of thousands of years. That endurance speaks to more than brute strength. It speaks to strategy. Think of how different our world is from theirs. When snow falls today, we step into insulated boots and wait for plows to clear the roads. In their time, snow was a predator in its own right, swallowing paths, blinding eyes, hiding dangers beneath its white surface. When night falls today, we flip a switch and light floods every corner. In their time, night was absolute, broken only by firelight, with darkness pressing in from all sides. Where we have locks on doors, they had nothing but vigilance, a circle of bodies, and trust in one another. The world of the Neanderthals was relentless in its cruelty. Scarcity shaped every choice. A broken spear could mean hunger. A twisted ankle could spell doom. Cold seeped into every moment, demanding constant preparation. Their survival was not a matter of instinct alone. Instinct might carry a beast through a season, but intelligence, planning, memory, and cooperation were the only tools that could carry Neanderthals through generations of Ice Age winters. Picture a morning hunt. The tribe gathers at the cave's edge, breath clouding the air. They move silently, each knowing their role. Hunters spread out, stalking a herd across frozen plains. This is not random chaos. It is coordinated effort, honed over years. The largest males drive prey into ambush points. Women and younger hunters use spears to close off escape routes. Success means meat, fat, and hides that will sustain them for weeks. Failure means hunger, frostbite, and perhaps the death of children waiting at home. In such a world, intelligence was survival itself. This intelligence extended beyond hunting. Neanderthals knew which plants could be eaten, which roots carried poison, which stones fractured best for tools. They remembered migration paths of animals, timed their movements with the seasons, and passed this knowledge across generations. Their memory was not written in books or stored in glowing screens. It lived in stories, gestures, demonstrations by firelight. Even shelter demanded thought. Caves offered safety, but caves could flood or collapse. Fire offered warmth, but fire also brought smoke and risk of burns. To live in their world was to constantly weigh risks, to make decisions that balanced danger against reward. Each choice was a calculation, each day a test of judgment. The contrast with our lives is almost absurd. We measure our discomfort by Wi-Fi signals, traffic delays, or the wrong flavor at a coffee shop. But Neanderthals measured theirs by life and death. For them, comfort meant the difference between frostbitten fingers and hands capable of shaping tools. It meant the difference between children who lived to adulthood and those buried under cairns of stone. And yet, despite this harshness, their world was not without beauty. Imagine the silence of an Ice Age morning, broken only by the distant call of a bird or the soft cracking of ice underfoot. Imagine the night sky, free from artificial light, filled with stars that seemed close enough to touch. For Neanderthals, the world was brutal, yes, but it was also alive with rhythms and patterns they understood deeply. It is here, in this context, that their intelligence shines brightest. To look at their world through modern eyes is to see impossibility. How could anyone endure such cold, such danger, such scarcity? And yet they did. They not only endured, they thrived, creating tools, sharing knowledge, raising children, burying their dead with care. The world of the Neanderthals tells us a truth we too often forget. Survival in a hostile world requires more than muscle. It requires memory, foresight, creativity, and trust. It requires intelligence. This is the world they inhabited, a world where every day was a battle, every night was a test, and every choice echoed across generations. A world that demanded more from them than we can imagine, a world that shaped them into far more than dumb cavemen. As we step deeper into their story, we must carry this truth. Neanderthals were not simply reacting to nature. They were thinking, planning, strategizing, and adapting. They were not shadows in caves, but people, intelligent, resilient, and closer to us than we dare admit. The glow of firelight flickers against the cave wall. A man sits cross-legged, a slab of flint resting on his knee. His child leans close, watching intently. With a firm grip, the man lifts a stone hammer and strikes at just the right angle. A sharp flake chips away, thin and precise. He holds it up to the firelight, inspecting the edge, then sets it aside. Another strike, another flake. The rhythm is steady, patient, deliberate. The child reaches for the tool, tries to mimic the motion. His first strike glances off awkwardly, sending shards skittering across the ground. The man does not scold. Instead, he adjusts his child's grip, demonstrates again, and waits for the next attempt. The lesson is clear. Tools are not accidents of chance. They are born of knowledge, planning, and teaching. For too long, Neanderthals were mocked as simple-minded creatures, as if their lives consisted only of brute survival. But their tools tell a very different story. A story of ingenuity, patience, and foresight. The technology they developed, now known as Mousterian technology, reveals not only their intelligence, but also their capacity to pass knowledge down through generations. These tools were not crude clubs or random stones. They were carefully crafted instruments designed for specific purposes, the products of minds capable of abstraction and refinement. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of Neanderthal tools across Europe and Western Asia, and what stands out most is their sophistication. The Mousterian tradition, named after the French site Le Moustier, was the hallmark of Neanderthal craftsmanship. Unlike earlier tools, which were simple flakes struck off a core, Mousterian tools were shaped with precision. Neanderthals employed a method known as the Levallois technique, where they prepared the stone core in advance, shaping it so that one carefully aimed strike would detach a flake of the desired size and shape. This was not trial and error, it was deliberate design. The Neanderthals had to imagine the final tool before they began, preparing the core with a mental blueprint of the outcome. That ability to plan several steps ahead, to envision the future shape of an object in their minds, is a hallmark of advanced cognition. It required not only motor skills but also spatial awareness, memory, and patience. From these flakes they fashioned scrapers for working hides, points for spears, and knives for cutting meat. Each tool had a purpose, and each purpose reflected an understanding of the challenges of survival. Scrapers smoothed animal hides into clothing warm enough to withstand glacial winters. Spears allowed them to hunt large game from a distance, reducing the risk of injury. Knives cut through sinew and bone, making efficient use of every hunted animal. Neanderthals did not stop at shaping stone. They were among the first humans to combine materials, creating composite tools that required multiple steps of preparation. Archaeological evidence reveals they used natural adhesives, a primitive kind of glue made from birch bark tar. To produce this substance, they had to heat birch bark in low oxygen conditions, a process that demands careful control of fire and an understanding of cause and effect. Too much oxygen and the bark would simply burn. Too little, and it would not release the tar. Yet Neanderthals mastered this process tens of thousands of years ago. With this glue, they hafted stone points onto wooden shafts, creating durable spears. Some were thrusting spears for close-range combat with prey. Others may have been designed as throwing weapons. Tests with replicas suggest Neanderthal spears were strong enough to pierce the hide of a mammoth. These were not makeshift tools. They were engineered weapons, the product of minds that understood leverage, durability, and efficiency. They also experimented with bone and antler, shaping them into tools suited for scraping, digging, and sewing. Bone needles, sometimes with drilled eyes, suggest they stitched hides into fitted clothing. Such garments would have been essential in the Ice Age climate, offering insulation far beyond simple draped skins. The act of sewing, too, reflects foresight. Hours of preparation before the cold set in, ensuring survival in the bitterest months. Each of these technologies demonstrates intelligence in its purest form. To shape a Levallois core, one must imagine the future. To produce birch tar, one must control conditions unseen by the eye. To haft a spear, one must combine materials with an understanding of durability. And to sew clothing, one must invest hours of effort for a reward that may not come until weeks later, when the cold deepens. This is the essence of foresight, the ability to act in the present for the sake of the future. Neanderthals lived in a world where mistakes were costly, where wasted effort could mean death. Their survival across hundreds of thousands of years is proof that they consistently made intelligent choices, adapting their technology to fit their needs. Perhaps the most telling sign of their intelligence is not the tools themselves, but the evidence that knowledge was shared. Just as the micro-scene of father and child illustrates, tool-making was not instinctive. It was taught. Children had to learn how to strike flint, how to judge angles, how to recognize good stone from bad. This required communication, demonstration, and patience, hallmarks of a culture that valued knowledge as much as muscle. Archaeologists have found sites where multiple generations of tools lie side by side, suggesting communities where skills were passed down over centuries. The consistency of Mousterian technology across vast regions of Europe indicates a shared tradition, a kind of cultural continuity. This is not the mark of mindless creatures, but of intelligent beings with memory, culture, and teaching. When compared to early Homo sapiens, Neanderthals hold their own, and sometimes even surpass us. For a long time, scholars assumed our species' tools were superior, but evidence shows that for thousands of years, Neanderthals produced tools as sophisticated as, and occasionally more durable than, those of our ancestors. The idea that we triumphed solely because of technological superiority has been largely debunked. In fact, some researchers suggest that early Homo sapiens may have learned from Neanderthals when they first entered Europe. Encounters between the two groups likely included not only competition, but also exchange of genes, of strategies, and perhaps even of technology. The very fact that Neanderthal DNA exists in modern humans is proof of a connection deeper than rivalry. Picture again that child beside the fire. His father guides his hand, correcting the angle of the strike. The boy strikes again, this time cleaving off a sharp, usable flake. His face lights with pride as he holds it up, and his father nods approvingly. In this moment, knowledge is not just transferred, it is preserved. The survival of the tribe rests on this exchange, on each generation learning not just to live, but to adapt, to create, to think. The boy will grow, and one day he will teach his own children the same skills. The rhythm of flint against stone, repeated across generations, is the heartbeat of Neanderthal intelligence. For decades, the insult Neanderthal conjured images of clumsy creatures with crude tools, but the evidence speaks louder. Their mastery of stone, glue, spears, and bone reflects not primitive minds, but innovative ones. They were not fumbling in darkness, but experimenting, refining, improving. Each tool is a testament to thought, to imagination, to problem-solving. When we hold a Neanderthal tool today, we are not holding a relic of stupidity. We are holding the work of a craftsman, an innovator, a teacher. We are holding proof that Neanderthals were not only survivors of their world, but also thinkers, engineers, and creators of technology that carried them through the most brutal age the Earth has known. Understanding their tools is understanding their minds. Through stone, bone, and fire, Neanderthals revealed their capacity to imagine the unseen, to plan for the future, and to teach one another. But intelligence is not only about tools, it is also about imagination, creativity, and expression. To see the fullest picture of their brilliance, we must look beyond function, to art, symbolism, and the world of ideas. The cave is silent except for the steady crackle of fire. Shadows dance across the walls, rising and falling like spirits. A Neanderthal crouches near the stone, a fragment of bone in one hand, a sharp flake in the other. Slowly, carefully he carves. The marks are not random scratches born of boredom. They repeat with rhythm, with intent, with meaning. A child watches, eyes wide, trying to understand what the lines represent. A story is unfolding, not in words, but in symbols, etched into bone to carry an idea across time. For decades, scientists laughed at the possibility that Neanderthals could dream in symbols. The stereotype of the brutish caveman left little room for imagination, for abstract thought, for art. Creativity was said to belong to Homo sapiens alone, the unique spark that separated us from them. But one discovery after another has forced us to reconsider. Neanderthals were not only survivors of harsh Ice Age landscapes, they were also creators, artists, and storytellers. In caves across Spain, France, and beyond, archaeologists have uncovered paintings that predate the arrival of Homo sapiens. Hand stencils pressed against stone, simple lines forming patterns. Red and black pigments splashed across walls. For years, scholars argued about their origin, unwilling to believe Neanderthals could have painted them. But dating techniques revealed something astonishing. Some of these works are more than 60,000 years old, thousands of years before modern humans ever set foot in Europe. This evidence overturns centuries of assumption. The paintings were not the exclusive work of Homo sapiens. Neanderthals left their mark as well, not only on bones and tools, but on the very walls of their shelters. These handprints and patterns speak of a mind capable of abstraction. To press pigment against stone in the shape of a hand is to declare, I was here, I existed. Remember me, that is art, that is symbolism. Neanderthals also adorned themselves. Archaeological sites have yielded beads made from shells, bird talons fashioned into necklaces, and ochre pigments ground into powders. These were not utilitarian objects. They did not cut meat or scrape hides. They were decorative, symbolic, and social. Imagine a young Neanderthal woman wearing a necklace of eagle talons. Each claw tells a story, of a hunt, of skill, of courage. The jewelry communicates status, identity, perhaps even belonging to a group. To wear color in a world of snow and ice is to send a message. We see beauty even in struggle. Pigments too reveal abstract thought. Neanderthals crushed minerals into powders of red, yellow, and black. They smeared them on bodies, on tools, perhaps even on the dead. These acts go beyond survival. They reflect identity, ritual, and meaning. One of the most profound signs of symbolic thought lies in how Neanderthals treated their dead. In Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists discovered Neanderthal remains buried with pollen traces, suggesting flowers were placed on graves. In other sites, bodies were carefully positioned, sometimes accompanied by tools or animal bones. Burial is not an instinctive act. It is a symbolic one. To bury the dead is to acknowledge their value, to grieve, to believe in something beyond the immediate present. Ritual reflects memory and meaning. It shows that Neanderthals thought not only of survival today, but of existence, identity, and perhaps even an afterlife. For years, scholars dismissed such evidence as coincidence, but as more sites revealed similar patterns, the picture became undeniable. Neanderthals cared for their dead with ritual, honor, and symbolic intent. For decades, the very idea of Neanderthal art was mocked. They were depicted as incapable of imagination, as if their minds were chained to the present moment. Homo sapiens, the story went, were the symbolic species, unique in their ability to create culture. But now the evidence says otherwise. Neanderthals painted before we did. They decorated themselves with jewelry. They buried their dead with ritual. They carved patterns onto bone. They dreamed in symbols just as we did. The contrast is striking, from mindless brutes to artists whose marks survive tens of thousands of years later. This revelation forces us to reconsider what intelligence really means. It is not simply the ability to hunt or craft tools. It is the ability to imagine, to communicate ideas beyond the moment, to create meaning that endures beyond death. In this light, Neanderthals emerge not as shadows, but as storytellers. Art and symbolism are tied to communication. To teach, to share, to pass on knowledge, these require language. For years, researchers argued Neanderthals lacked true speech. But studies of the FOXP2 gene, essential for language in modern humans, revealed Neanderthals carried the same version. Their hyoid bones, critical for speech production, matched ours. And the symbolic behaviors we see in art and ritual suggests they must have used language to share meaning. Picture a group of Neanderthals around a fire. One tells a story of the hunt, gesturing with hands, marking lines on a bone to illustrate. Children listen, elders nod. In that moment, communication is more than words. It is culture. It is the transmission of knowledge that ensures survival. Language, whether spoken or symbolic, was the bridge that bound them together. Imagine that carver again, crouched near the fire. His hands move with practiced rhythm, carving lines into bone. The child beside him tilts her head, puzzled. He points, repeats a sound, points again. Slowly, she begins to see. The lines are not random. They represent something. Perhaps the hunt, perhaps the tribe, perhaps a memory of one long gone. For the first time, she understands that marks can hold meaning beyond the moment. The bone becomes more than a tool. It becomes a story, a message, a bridge across time. In that instant, Neanderthal intelligence shines as brightly as any modern spark. The evidence of Neanderthal art, jewelry, pigments, burials, and communication forces us to ask, what does it mean to be human? If humanity is defined by symbolism, then Neanderthals were human. If it is defined by imagination, then Neanderthals were human. If it is defined by memory, ritual, and culture, then Neanderthals were human. Perhaps the only difference between us and them is perspective. We are the ones who survived, who wrote history, who told the story from our side. But the marks on cave walls, the beads strung from talons, the graves dusted with flowers, tell another story. One that belongs to them as much as to us. In their tools, we saw foresight. In their art, we see imagination. Together, these reveal minds capable not only of surviving, but of dreaming. Yet intelligence is not just what you make or what you imagine. It is also how you live with others, how you cooperate, care, and share. To see the full measure of Neanderthal brilliance, we must step into their social world, where survival depended on bonds of trust and acts of compassion. The fire crackles in the heart of the cave. A man with clouded eyes, blind from injury or age, sits near its warmth. His hands tremble slightly as he reaches forward, feeling for comfort in the glow he can no longer see. Before he can lean too close, a hand rests on his shoulder, steady, guiding, protective. His kin pull him gently back, settling him safely among furs. Food is pressed into his hands. He eats slowly, surrounded by voices and laughter he cannot follow fully, but he smiles. He is not abandoned. He is cared for. This scene may sound simple, but in the brutal world of Ice Age Europe, it is extraordinary. For a long time, the image of Neanderthals was one of solitary brutes, competing savagely, leaving the weak behind. Yet the evidence tells a different story, a story of cooperation, compassion, and community. Neanderthals were not only intelligent in shaping tools or creating art. Their greatest intelligence may have been in how they treated one another. Neanderthal survival was never the work of individuals alone. Archaeological evidence suggests they lived in small bands or tribes, often made up of extended families. Within these groups, each person played a role. Hunters pursued game, gatherers collected plants and firewood, toolmakers shaped stone, and elders shared memory and knowledge. Children were not left to fend for themselves but raised within the safety of the group. The cave was more than a shelter from cold. It was a home, a place of laughter, of shared meals, of comfort. Hearths discovered in ancient sites show repeated use, suggesting that families returned to the same spots over generations. The distribution of bones, tools, and ashes reveals a social order, places where food was prepared, where fires burned, where people gathered. These were not chaotic camps, they were organized households. Perhaps the most remarkable window into Neanderthal compassion comes from their fossils. Many skeletons show injuries that would have crippled individuals. Broken limbs, damaged spines, even skull trauma. Yet the bones also show healing. These people lived long after their injuries, far longer than they could have survived alone. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, one skeleton tells the story of a man who lived despite devastating disabilities. He had a withered arm, probably from childhood injury. He was blind in one eye and may have been partially deaf. He would have struggled to hunt or gather, and yet he lived for decades. His survival was only possible because others provided food, shelter, and protection. He was carried, fed, and valued, not discarded. Another skeleton shows evidence of arthritis and age-related degeneration. This elder lived into advanced years, long past the prime of hunting and gathering. Such longevity points not to luck, but to care. Elders were respected. not abandoned, likely treasured as keepers of memory and tradition. These discoveries reveal something profound. Neanderthals did not live by the law of the strongest. They lived by the strength of community. The survival of disabled individuals cannot be explained by self-interest alone. Feeding, carrying, and protecting those who could not contribute required effort, time, and resources. In a world of scarcity, why would a tribe choose to bear such burdens? The answer lies in altruism, the recognition that cooperation and compassion benefit the group as a whole. A blind elder may not hunt, but he may tell stories, pass down wisdom, or teach children. A crippled hunter may still shape tools or guard fires. Beyond utility, there is something deeper, an emotional bond, a recognition of kinship. Neanderthals cared not because it was efficient, but because they valued each other. This capacity for care reflects a kind of intelligence no less important than tool-making. It is social intelligence, the ability to see beyond the self, to understand that the group thrives when all are protected. In this sense, cooperation itself is a survival strategy as vital as any spear or fire. Picture again the man with clouded eyes. Snow howls outside, pressing against the cave like a predator searching for weakness. Within, the tribe huddles around the fire. The blind man stirs, confused by sounds he cannot locate. A younger relative takes his hand, guiding him forward. Step by careful step, he is led to warmth. He lowers himself beside the hearth, furs wrapped around his shoulders. Someone places roasted meat into his palms, while another feeds the fire to keep it strong. The man eats, not with fear, but with comfort, surrounded by voices that remind him he belongs. In that moment, survival is not measured by strength or vision. It is measured by love. Modern science often measures intelligence by problem-solving, memory, or creativity. But in the harsh reality of Neanderthal life, intelligence also meant the ability to cooperate. No single individual, no matter how strong, could survive alone against predators, winters, and scarcity. Success required trust, hunters working in coordinated groups, families sharing resources, tribes defending one another. Even their tools, as advanced as they were, reveal cooperation. The production of birch tar, the hafting of spears, the crafting of hides into clothing. These were not solo endeavors. They demanded collaboration, knowledge sharing, and group effort. The fire itself, the heart of every camp, was sustained not by one, but by all. In this sense, Neanderthal cooperation was as much a technology as their tools. It was a survival mechanism woven into the fabric of their lives. For generations, the word Neanderthal conjured images of savagery, beings who lived by violence, who abandoned the weak, who knew nothing of tenderness. But the fossils and hearths tell a different story. Far from heartless, they were compassionate. Far from solitary, they were communal. Far from brutal, they were deeply human. This contrast forces us to confront our own assumptions. We once believed intelligence meant standing apart, competing, dominating. But the Neanderthals show us that intelligence also means coming together, protecting, and sharing. The very qualities that we call human today, love, empathy, cooperation, lived in them as well. The hearth was not only a place of warmth, but a place of stories. Around the fire, Neanderthals likely shared tales of the hunt, warnings of dangers, or myths to explain the world. These stories, passed through words and gestures, were the glue that bound the tribe together. Cooperation extended beyond physical survival. It created a shared culture, a sense of belonging, an identity larger than the self. Through storytelling, values were taught. Through cooperation, lessons were lived. Together, these built the fabric of Neanderthal society. If tools show foresight and art shows imagination, then cooperation shows wisdom. It reflects an understanding that life is not only about the individual, but about the community. The survival of the weak alongside the strong is the most powerful evidence that Neanderthals were not mindless brutes, but empathetic beings. In this light, the measure of Neanderthal intelligence is not only in what they built, but in how they cared. Their compassion was a form of strategy, a recognition that the group's survival was greater than the sum of its parts. And in their cooperation, we glimpse the very roots of our own humanity. The world of the Neanderthals was one of struggle, but it was also one of care. They shaped tools with foresight, painted caves with imagination, and supported one another with compassion. Yet survival was never guaranteed. As the Ice Age deepened, as challenges mounted, their resilience would be tested like never before. To understand their full story, we must turn to their greatest trials, the battles against environment, extinction, and the forces that would decide their fate. The snow is fresh, untouched, stretching across the plain like a vast white ocean. The air hangs heavy with silence, broken only by the low rumble of a herd of mammoths in the distance. Dozens of enormous shapes move slowly, tusks gleaming, steam rising from their bodies in the frigid dawn. From behind a ridge, a group of Neanderthals watches. Each breath sends clouds into the cold air. Each hand grips a spear, its stone tip hafted with care, hardened by fire. The hunters are still, waiting for the right moment. This is not chaos. This is strategy. To imagine Neanderthal hunting is to imagine a test of wit as much as strength. The Ice Age was not a world of convenience. There were no livestock pens, no easy meals, no fallback on stored grain. Survival depended on large game, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, bison, aurochs. These creatures were not just meals. They were moving fortresses of flesh and bone, armed with tusks, horns, and sheer mass. To bring one down required planning, coordination, and courage. Evidence from kill sites reveals just how ambitious Neanderthals were. Bones of mammoths and rhinos, butchered with stone tools, speak of hunts that could not have been accidental. These animals were too dangerous, too powerful to be taken by individuals. Only a coordinated group working together with foresight could succeed. At sites like La Côte de Saint-Brelade on the island of Jersey, researchers uncovered heaps of mammoth and rhinoceros bones at the base of cliffs. The evidence suggests Neanderthals drove these enormous beasts into natural traps, using the landscape as a weapon. This was not blind chance. It was strategy on a grand scale. A plan that required knowledge of terrain, communication among hunters, and precise timing. Imagine the courage it took to face down a mammoth with nothing but spears, fire, and teamwork, to risk being trampled beneath feet the size of shields, to dodge tusks that could impale in a heartbeat. And yet they succeeded again and again. Archaeological sites across Europe reveal repeated patterns of hunting tactics. Neanderthals set ambushes near waterholes, waiting for herds to arrive. They learned the migration routes of animals, predicting when and where they would pass. They positioned themselves in groups, closing off escape routes, driving prey into kill zones where spears could strike from multiple directions. This was intelligence in motion, a living form of chess played against beasts of unimaginable size. Each hunter had to trust the others, to act at the right moment, to move with precision. A single mistake could mean death. Success was not guaranteed, but with strategy, with patience, with teamwork, the tribe could bring down prey that sustained them for weeks. Perhaps the most remarkable evidence of Neanderthal ingenuity is their use of fire in hunting. Fire was not only warmth and light, it was strategy. Some sites suggest Neanderthals used controlled burns to drive animals into traps or toward hunters waiting in ambush. Flames and smoke turned the environment itself into a weapon, guiding massive creatures into paths of no return. Picture the scene, the crackle of fire spreading through dry grass, the panic of bison scattering, their heavy bodies thundering toward a narrow pass. Behind the smoke, hunters wait with spears raised, ready to strike. The fire is no accident. It is deliberate, dangerous, and brilliant. This manipulation of the environment shows foresight. It reveals minds that could imagine outcomes, calculate risks, and control forces far larger than themselves. Hunting was not just about the kill, it was about preparation before and survival after. Spears had to be made, sharpened, and tested. Hides had to be tanned for warmth. Meat had to be cut, preserved, shared. Each step demanded knowledge and cooperation. After a successful hunt, the work continued. A mammoth could feed a tribe for weeks, but only if butchered efficiently. Bones were broken for marrow, hides scraped for clothing, sinews used for binding. Nothing was wasted. Each part of the animal was transformed into life for the community. This efficiency reflects intelligence as much as the hunt itself. To plan for food beyond the moment, to store and prepare, to think ahead. These are the hallmarks of survival strategy. It is easy to admire Neanderthals from the comfort of modern life, but consider, for a moment, yourself in their world. Could you survive without supermarkets, without heating, without the guarantee of tomorrow's meal? Could you stand on a frozen plain, spear in hand, facing down a creature 10 times your size, trusting your life to the coordination of your tribe? Most of us would not last a week, yet Neanderthals endured for hundreds of thousands of years. Their survival was not luck. It was intelligence forged through necessity, strategy born of danger. Their world was unforgiving, but they mastered it. Every successful hunt tells the story of cooperation. Hunters driving prey into ambush, others waiting with spears, fires kindled at the right place, the right moment. Each individual had a role, and the tribe succeeded only when all worked together. This reliance on teamwork reflects the social intelligence of Neanderthals. They understood not only the behavior of animals but also the strengths and weaknesses of their kin. They trusted one another, coordinated, and adapted. It was not survival of the fittest individual, but survival of the most cooperative group. The old caricature of Neanderthals imagined them as reckless brutes, charging beasts with little thought, living by muscle rather than mind. But the evidence shatters this image. Far from reckless, they were deliberate. Far from chaotic, they were organized. Far from simple, they were strategic. To bring down the giants of the Ice Age required more than brawn. It required planning, foresight, and communication. It required intelligence every bit as sharp as the stone edges of their spears. The hunters wait, hearts pounding, as the herd draws closer. Breath clouds the air. Spears are gripped tightly. A signal is given, a cry, a gesture. The group surges forward, firelight flickering as torches wave. The herd panics, charging toward the cliff's edge. The ground shakes with thunder as massive bodies stumble. A mammoth bellows, crashing down, its great form finally collapsing. The hunters rush in, spears piercing, voices rising. The beast falls silent. There is no cheer, no celebration, only relief. They have won against impossible odds. But tomorrow will bring another test. For now, they gather around their prize, knowing this victory means survival for their tribe. What emerges from the evidence is clear. Neanderthals were not passive victims of their environment. They were active strategists, shaping outcomes with intelligence and foresight. Hunting, once thought to be brute force, is revealed as a symphony of planning, cooperation, and courage. This intelligence extended beyond the kill. It shaped how they shared food, how they prepared for scarcity, how they sustained the group. Every hunt was more than survival. It was proof of minds capable of adapting, imagining, and overcoming. The story of Neanderthal hunting is not one of chaos, but of brilliance. They hunted giants with strategy, used fire as a weapon, and built survival on cooperation. But intelligence is measured not only in tools and tactics, it is also written in their very bodies, in the traces left in bones and DNA, revealing just how close they were to us. To understand the final pieces of their story, we must look not at the hunt, but at the science hidden within their remains. The fire glows low in the cave, throwing golden light across the rough stone walls. A mother sits close, her child nestled against her side. She points to a tool, shapes a sound, repeats it gently. The child mimics the word, stumbles, then tries again. The mother smiles, nods, and repeats the sound until the child's voice is clear. Around them, others murmur softly, exchanging words, sharing stories, passing the long night with voices that bind them together. For generations, the stereotype of Neanderthals painted them as mute brutes, creatures who grunted and gestured, incapable of true language. But modern science has revealed a different truth. Not only could Neanderthals likely speak, but their communication may have been rich, complex, and deeply human. Their voices, though long silent, still echo through the genes and bones they left behind. One of the strongest pieces of evidence lies within DNA. The FOXP2 gene, often called the language gene, plays a crucial role in speech and language development. Mutations in this gene in modern humans lead to severe difficulties with speech. For a long time, it was thought to be unique to our species, a marker of our supposed superiority. But when Neanderthal DNA was sequenced, scientists discovered they carried the same version of FOXP2 as we do. This discovery shocked researchers. It suggested that Neanderthals had the genetic foundation for speech. They were not silent. They had the biological tools to produce and understand language. The implication is profound. Speech is not merely about making sounds. It is about sharing ideas, teaching, planning, comforting, and dreaming. If Neanderthals possessed this capacity, then their world was filled with voices, stories, lessons, songs, and conversations around fires. Another striking fact is that Neanderthal brains were, on average, larger than those of Homo sapiens. Their skulls housed volumes that sometimes exceeded ours by 10 to 20%. For years, this fact was twisted into a paradox. How could creatures with bigger brains be considered less intelligent? The assumption was that size meant inefficiency, that their brains were somehow wasted. But research paints a more nuanced picture. Neanderthal brains were differently organized, with some areas proportionally larger than in modern humans. They may have devoted more neural space to vision and motor control, adaptations to the harsh Ice Age environment. Yet this does not imply a lack of intelligence. On the contrary, their larger brain size suggests they had the cognitive resources to manage complex social lives, advanced toolmaking, and most importantly, communication. The contrast is clear. Bigger brains did not mean stupidity. They may have supported forms of thought and communication as intricate as our own, though shaped by the unique challenges of their world. Language is more than words. It is how we teach, how we organize, how we express emotion. To pass on toolmaking skills, Neanderthals would have needed more than gestures. To coordinate hunts, they needed signals, strategies, and shared understanding. To comfort children or care for the injured, they needed words of reassurance. Picture a hunt. One Neanderthal signals to another, warning of prey nearby. Quiet words are exchanged, strategies whispered, positions planned. Later, around the fire, elders explain the hunt to children, describing dangers and triumphs. Language transforms experience into knowledge, and knowledge into survival. It is difficult to imagine Neanderthal life without some form of spoken communication. The complexity of their society demands it. The evidence of art and burial further supports the idea of Neanderthal language. To paint symbols on a cave wall, to carve patterns into bone, to bury the dead with ritual. These acts require shared meaning, and shared meaning requires communication. Language and symbolism are intertwined. If Neanderthals engaged in symbolic thought, they likely had the words to express it. Perhaps their language was not identical to ours. Their sounds may have differed, their grammar unfamiliar. But the essence was there, a system of shared symbols that allowed them to express ideas beyond the immediate moment. In that sense, their speech was as human as ours. For centuries, the image of Neanderthals as silent, grunting creatures went unchallenged. Scientists laughed at the idea that they could speak, dismissing them as evolutionary failures. But the evidence says otherwise. The FOXP2 gene, their brain size, their cultural behaviors, all point to communication as complex and vital as our own. The contrast is stark, from mute brutes to storytellers, from silence to voices carried on the wind of the Ice Age. The more we learn, the louder those voices become, reminding us that Neanderthals were not so different from ourselves. Imagine again the mother and child by the fire. The mother points to an ember, makes a sound, repeats it. The child tries, falters, then laughs. The tribe joins in, encouraging, repeating, reinforcing the sound. Slowly, the word takes shape, becoming a part of the child's memory. Tomorrow, that word will be used again, passed from one generation to the next. In this way, language becomes the thread that binds the community. Each word is more than sound. It is meaning, carried forward in memory, shaping thought, shaping survival. Why does language matter so much? Because survival in Neanderthal times depended on cooperation. To coordinate hunts, to share resources, to warn of danger, all required communication. Language allowed them to move beyond instinct, to plan, to imagine, to strategize. In this sense, language was as vital a tool as fire or spears. It was invisible, yet powerful. It bound the tribe together, made knowledge last beyond the moment, and ensured that each generation was stronger than the one before. The discovery that Neanderthals could speak challenges the last barrier between us and them. For so long, language was held as the ultimate human trait, the dividing line between Homo sapiens and all others. But if Neanderthals shared this trait, then the distinction fades. They were not less human. They were human in a different form. Their larger brains, their genes, their symbolic culture all point to beings capable of thought, emotion, and expression as deep as ours. Perhaps the real difference lies not in capacity, but in history. We survived, and they did not. But their voices, once dismissed, are now recognized as echoes of our own. In their tools, we saw foresight. In their art, we saw imagination. In their compassion, we saw humanity. And in their voices, we hear the final proof. Neanderthals were not silent shadows, but communicators, storytellers, and thinkers. To complete their story, we must now turn to the science of their legacy. The DNA they left behind, woven into us, carrying whispers of their world into our own. The firelight flickers on stone walls as a Neanderthal woman looks across the darkened cave. She is not alone. Strangers sit at the edge of the circle, taller, narrower-faced, with unfamiliar accents to their voices. Their clothes are stitched differently, their tools shaped in ways she does not recognize. Yet they are not enemies tonight. Food is shared, stories exchanged, and in the fire's glow, the distance between them narrows. These are not beasts meeting humans. These are two branches of the same family tree, finally touching. For most of history, we imagined this meeting as a clash. We told ourselves that Homo sapiens were the victors, the innovators, the conquerors. Neanderthals were cast as the defeated, the primitive cousins who disappeared because they could not compete. But the evidence tells a richer story. The encounter between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens was not just conflict. It was also exchange, cooperation, and intimacy. In fact, they live on in us today. Their DNA carried in our blood, their traits whispered through our genes. Around 60,000 years ago, Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa into the lands already occupied by Neanderthals. Across Europe and Western Asia, the two species crossed paths. They were not so different. Both walked upright, used fire, shaped tools, and cared for their families. Both hunted the same prey and endured the same winters. Imagine the first encounter. A group of Homo sapiens stumbles upon the edge of a Neanderthal camp. Spears are raised, voices tense. But then curiosity wins. They lower their weapons, exchange gestures, perhaps even share fire. What began with suspicion became the foundation for interaction. The archaeological record reveals hints of these meetings. Similarities in tool design suggest knowledge was exchanged. Shell beads, pigments, and ornaments appear in overlapping layers, as if traditions blended. And most telling of all, DNA proves that these encounters went far deeper than trade. For centuries, the idea that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens interbred was unthinkable. They were considered too different, too distant. But advances in genetics shattered that assumption. When Neanderthal DNA was sequenced, scientists made a startling discovery. Modern non-African humans carry 1–2% Neanderthal DNA. This means our ancestors did not simply replace Neanderthals. They mingled with them, lived beside them, and formed families together. Their children carried blended heritage, half Neanderthal, half Homo sapiens. Over time, those children's descendants spread across continents, carrying Neanderthal genes into the future, into us. Today, every person of European or Asian descent is, in a sense, part Neanderthal. Their blood runs through ours, their genes shaping our bodies, our health, even our minds. What did we inherit from them? Scientists have traced several traits to Neanderthal DNA. Our immune systems, for example, carry genes that strengthen resistance to diseases. Gifts from Neanderthals who had adapted to Eurasian environments long before we arrived. Some of our hair and skin traits also trace back to them. Adaptations for surviving colder, darker climates. Even psychological and neurological traits bear their imprint. Certain genes linked to mood regulation, sleep patterns, and even how we process sunlight have Neanderthal origins. In ways both visible and hidden, they shaped who we are. The irony is striking. Once dismissed as inferior, Neanderthals did not vanish without a trace. They passed on traits that helped us thrive. In a sense, their extinction was not absolute. They became part of us. Think about it. Every time you catch a cold and fight it off, part of that resilience may come from Neanderthal genes. Every time your skin tans in the sun or your body adapts to winter, you carry their legacy. Even in your brain, in the way you sleep or the moods you feel, echoes of Neanderthals may whisper. They are not gone. They live inside us. They shape the very people who would one day look back and call them other. The truth is unsettling. When we imagine Neanderthals, we are imagining part of ourselves. The contrast could not be sharper. For centuries, Neanderthals were cast as evolutionary failures, a species too weak, too stupid, too primitive to survive. Yet modern science shows they were neither inferior nor irrelevant. They were contributors to our survival, partners in our story. Their DNA runs in our veins. Their traits strengthened us, helped us adapt, made us more resilient. Without Neanderthals, we might not be who we are today. The insult Neanderthal collapses under the weight of evidence. They were not failures. They were family. Were there battles between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens? Almost certainly. Competition for resources, territory, and prey would have sparked conflict. But to reduce their encounters only to violence is to miss the deeper truth. They also shared knowledge, culture, and lives. Perhaps around fires they exchanged hunting strategies. Perhaps they learned new ways of shaping tools, sewing hides, or using pigments. Perhaps they sat together, telling stories in languages foreign yet familiar, discovering in each other a reflection of themselves. And in some cases they formed bonds far closer. Interbreeding is not only a genetic fact, it is a human one. It means love, intimacy, families that bridge two species. To imagine these encounters is to imagine moments of recognition. We are not so different. Picture a child sitting by a fire 50,000 years ago. Her features are a blend. The heavy brow of her Neanderthal father, the delicate face of her Homo sapiens mother. She listens to her parents speak, their words shaped by different accents, different traditions. Yet to her, they are not rivals, they are family. She carries both worlds within her, unaware that her descendants will spread across the globe, carrying that mixture forever. That child is not fantasy, she is history. Her genes live in us today. Modern genetics leaves no doubt. Neanderthal DNA is written into our genomes. It is a permanent reminder that we did not replace them completely. Instead, we absorbed them, carrying their memory not in artifacts alone, but in our very cells. This revelation changes everything about how we see them. They are not an extinct other. They are part of our lineage. They walk with us still, in our blood, in our skin, in our immune systems, in our very thoughts. The story of Homo sapiens and Neanderthals is not one of triumph and defeat. It is one of encounter, exchange, and legacy. We did not simply outcompete them. We lived beside them, learned from them, loved them, and carried them with us into the future. The psychological weight of this truth is powerful. When you look in the mirror, a small part of the face you see belongs to them. When you speak, when you think, when you feel, you may carry echoes of their world. They are not gone. They are here, living inside us. The encounters between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were not a simple tale of superiority and extinction. They were a mingling, a blending of worlds that still shapes us today. But if they live within us, the question remains, why did they disappear as a distinct people? To answer this, we must explore the great mysteries of their decline, the forces of environment, competition, and fate that led to the end of the Neanderthal age. The cave is quiet now. The fire has burned low, its embers faint and fading. Outside, the wind howls across an empty plain where mammoths once roamed in herds. A small band of Neanderthals huddles together, thin from hunger, weary from the relentless cold. They are not less intelligent than their ancestors. They are not weaker nor slower. But the world has changed, and survival hangs by the thinnest of threads. For thousands of years, Neanderthals endured the Ice Age. They hunted giants, mastered fire, created tools, and cared for one another. Yet around 40,000 years ago, their story began to fade. Slowly, tribe by tribe, region by region, they vanished. Their bones no longer appeared in caves. Their tools no longer littered the ground. By 30,000 years ago, they were gone, leaving only echoes in our DNA. One of the most powerful forces behind their decline was climate. The Ice Age was never stable. Temperatures swung wildly. Glaciers advanced and retreated. Ecosystems shifted. Neanderthals were adapted to cold, but rapid changes brought new challenges. Forests vanished, replaced by open tundra. Prey animals migrated or dwindled. Regions that had once been reliable hunting grounds became barren. Even with intelligence and strategy, survival became a constant gamble. When food grew scarce, tribes were forced to move, to risk new territories, to face dangers they had never known before. Some adapted, others starved. Climate did not kill them in a single blow. It weakened them, testing their resilience, eroding their numbers over centuries. Into this fragile world came another force, Homo sapiens. Our species had spread out of Africa, bringing new tools, new tactics, and growing numbers. For a time, Neanderthals and sapiens lived side by side. They traded, they mingled, they interbred. But they also competed. Sapiens may have hunted more efficiently, with longer-range weapons like bows and throwing spears. They may have traveled in larger groups, sharing knowledge across vast distances. Their networks stretched farther, their communication perhaps more elaborate. For Neanderthals, whose populations were already small, this competition was devastating. Every herd hunted by sapiens meant fewer resources. Every encounter carried the risk of conflict. Slowly, sapiens expanded while Neanderthals dwindled. But extinction may not have been absolute. DNA tells us that Neanderthals live on inside us. Interbreeding blended their legacy into ours. In this sense, their disappearance was not only a loss but also a transformation. They became part of us, absorbed into the larger population of Homo sapiens. Still, the distinct culture, the unique identity of Neanderthals faded. The voices that once echoed in their caves fell silent. Their knowledge, their traditions, their stories ended. even as fragments of their blood survived. For too long, the myth persisted that Neanderthals vanished because they were stupid, that they could not adapt, could not compete, could not think. But the evidence says otherwise. They were intelligent, skilled, and resilient. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years in some of the harshest conditions the Earth has ever seen. Their fall was not stupidity, it was tragedy. They lived on the razor's edge of survival, and when the world shifted, when climate, competition, and chance collided, the margins grew too thin. They did not fall because they were weak. They fell because even the strong can be undone by forces beyond their control. Picture the last Neanderthal family. Perhaps they sat by a dwindling fire, listening to the wind howl outside their cave. They would not have known they were the last. They were simply living as their ancestors had, waiting for spring, hoping for prey, caring for their children. But no spring came. No herds returned. No new generation was born to carry their legacy forward. Slowly, quietly, the world closed around them. And so, one of humanity's greatest stories ended. Not with violence, not with stupidity, but with silence. They were smart, they were strong, they were creative, but they were unlucky. And yet their story does not truly end, because they live within us, in our DNA, in our bodies, in echoes of their world carried into our own. But the haunting question remains. What if they had survived as a people? What if Neanderthals still walked beside us today, not as shadows of the past, but as neighbors, friends, and fellow humans? This is the question we must now ask. Not just how they fell, but what it means that they almost endured. The fire burns low, its warmth fading into the night. Outside the cave, the wind still whispers across the frozen plain, carrying with it the memory of voices long gone. The Neanderthals are no longer here in body, but in a sense, they never left. Their echoes live in our DNA, in the tools we hold, in the very way we speak and think. As we close their story, it is time to reflect not on their disappearance, but on their enduring legacy. For so long, Neanderthals were framed as failed humans, a side branch of evolution destined for extinction. But this picture is far too simple and far too unfair. They were not failures. They were survivors who endured unimaginable conditions for hundreds of thousands of years. They were artists who left symbols on cave walls, engineers who crafted tools with foresight, caregivers who protected the weak, and storytellers who passed knowledge by firelight. Their intelligence was not lesser, only different, shaped by their world and their challenges. To call them failed is to misunderstand what survival really means. Every species lives within margins, and Neanderthals lived on the razor's edge of an Ice Age world. That they thrived for so long is not evidence of failure, but of resilience. In fact, by the measure of endurance, they outlasted Homo sapiens' current history on this planet so far. If survival is the test, then Neanderthals passed it many times over. We must reframe them not as broken drafts of humanity, but as another version of intelligence. One that walked alongside us, that mingled with us, that still lives within us. They were not our shadows, they were our kin. The story of Neanderthals is more than history. It is a mirror for us today, because just as they once faced the challenge of encountering the other, Homo sapiens arriving in their world, so do we face it now. Throughout history, the way humans treat those who are different has often determined survival, not just of individuals, but of entire civilizations. Do we exclude, destroy, and erase? Or do we share, learn, and blend? The Neanderthal story shows that survival is not always about being the strongest, or even the smartest. It is about cooperation, compassion, and the ability to see ourselves in those who seem different. How we treat the other often defines our survival. It was true then, it is true now. Perhaps the most humbling truth is this: the Neanderthals never truly disappeared. Their DNA is inside us. Every heartbeat carries fragments of their story. In our blood lie their adaptations, their strengths, their resilience. This means that when we speak, when we imagine, when we care for one another, we are not only Homo sapiens. We are also Neanderthal. Their intelligence, their compassion, their endurance, it did not vanish. It became part of us, written into the code of life itself. It is a haunting legacy, but also a beautiful one. They are not gone. They are us. So as you lie here, listening in the quiet, consider the story not of a vanished people, but of a family rediscovered. We once looked at Neanderthals as outsiders. Now science tells us they were never truly other. They were part of the human story all along. Their hands shaped tools like ours. Their eyes looked at the stars as ours do. Their voices carried stories by the fire, just as we tell stories tonight. And though their bodies are dust, their presence lingers. In every cell, in every strand of DNA, in every breath we take. This reflection is not only about them, it is about us. It is about remembering that intelligence comes in many forms, that survival is never guaranteed, and that the greatest strength of humanity has always been in connection. The fire dims, the voices grow quiet, and the night deepens. Imagine the last Neanderthal family drifting into sleep, comforted by one another, unaware that they are the final guardians of their kind. And yet their story did not end in silence. It continued in us, carried forward into the present, whispering through time. As you drift into sleep yourself, let that thought rest with you. We are not alone in our humanity. We are a chorus of ancestors, each contributing to the voice we call human. The Neanderthals are not a lost species. They are family, remembered in bone and blood, in silence and in song. Perhaps the smartest lesson the Neanderthals gave us is hidden not in bones or tools, but in our own bodies. It is the reminder that survival is never about perfection, but about persistence. That intelligence is not measured only by inventions, but by compassion. That the boundaries we draw between us and them are often illusions. And so, as you rest, remember this. Their story is not finished. It lives within you, in your blood, in your breath, in the quiet rhythms of your life. They were not failures. They were not brutes. They were a people who dreamed, who loved, who survived. And though the world calls them extinct, the truth is far stranger and far more beautiful. The Neanderthals are still here. They live in us,